Gonna record this. Welcome, everyone. I think everybody knows me, Anahita Joon, and I'm so happy to be here with author Jesse Crispin today. This woman, she is an author. I'm so excited about her, bringing her voice to you. She's the author of the Dead Ladies Project and the founder and former editor of Bookspot.com, which is now closed. She's also written for many publications, some of which continue to be in business, and she lives in Kansas City. Now, this is the book that we are talking about today. Can you see all of my notes? This book, I'm just gonna dive right in. By the way, we're right on time. Why I'm Not a Feminist, a Feminist Manifesto. I saw this book in May when I was on one of my annual pilgrimages to Glastonbury. And it was just there. And I basically read 4 lines on the cover and felt like I had been given permission to roar in a way that I was thinking like, oh, let me just keep holding this back. Let me make other people comfortable. And I picked up the book and I read it on the plane, and I was basically roaring inside the whole time that I was reading it, and just feverishly like underlining and highlighting and, just so excited. And so I want to read. Actually, I asked Jessa if she would like to read the cover, but I'm going to, because it's ferocious and she's the author. And well, we're going to open up the topic, so you'll see how this is going to go. All right. Okay, so I've just read this to so many people because it really speaks to me. And I really also honor you, Jessa, for just being so bold with your voice and going for it. So why I am not a feminist. They forgot that for something to be universally accepted, it must become as banal, as non-threatening, and ineffective as possible. Hence the pose. People don't like change, and so feminism must be as close to the status quo with minor modifications as it can be in order to recruit large numbers. In other words, it has to become entirely pointless. Radical change is scary. It's terrifying, actually. And the feminism I support is a full-on revolution, where women are not simply allowed to participate in the world as it already exists, an inherently corrupt world designed by a patriarchy to subjugate and control and destroy all challengers, but are actively able to reshape it, where women do not simply knock on the doors of churches, of governments, of capitalist marketplaces, and politely ask for admittance, but create their own religious systems, governments, and economies. My feminism is not one of incremental change, revealed in the end to be the same as ever, but more so. It is a cleansing fire, asking for a system that was built for the express purpose of oppressing to stop oppressing me is nonsense work. The only task worth doing is fully dismantling and replacing the system. This is why I cannot associate myself with a feminism that focuses dementedly on personal choice, whose goals include not the full destruction of corporate culture, but merely a higher percentage of female CEOs. A feminism that requires no thought, no discomfort, no real change. If feminism is universal, if it is something that all women and men can get on board with, then it is not for me. If feminism is nothing more than personal gain disguised as political progress, then it is not for me. If by declaring myself a feminist, I must reassure you I am not angry, I pose no threat, then feminism is definitely not for me. I am angry, and I do pose a threat. Yeah! Welcome. I'm so happy to have you with us. Is there anything that I have not said in your introduction that you would like to share about yourself or this book with our audience?
No, not really. I feel like that kind of covers it. It was a funny thing because the book was not necessarily my idea. I was asked to write it by the publisher, And it took me such a long time to do it because I would just be filled with despair whenever I would sort of even go near the manuscript, because I knew, well, I knew the culture that it was going to go into, a sort of very bland feminist culture, a very misogynistic, patriarchal culture, and I knew what tweets I was going to get if I wrote the book. So it was just sort of defeating me a little bit, but eventually I got over it.
I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you did. You know, it's yeah, it's just great. There are so many people I've shared it with, and you know, some of the people were even commenting today on Facebook saying, "I read it. I remember when you shared it with me, and I love it." And really, it takes. I acknowledge what it takes to go this far and to be, you know, to really call it out. And I just want to say, one of the reviews on the back, which is so great. You know, it says, the author's ferocious critique effectively reframes the terms of any serious discussion of feminism. You'll never trust a "you go girl, just lean in" bromide again. Forget busting the glass ceiling. Crispin has taken a wrecking ball to the whole structure. And it is very much that. So I'm excited to dive in. And especially at this time, you know, I feel like I'm so excited to, as I was going back through and underlining again with this whole Me Too movement that's really sparked so much over the last several months. And I'm looking forward to unpacking this, because I know for months I have been, my husband and I have just been in this dialogue of like, where is our part? Like, how do we get to take responsibility as women in this movement? Because so much of it has been sort of the first layer, which has been, you know, the healing for the victims, sort of that, you know, the healing that has to happen first. And then we can also take responsibility. So I'm just going to dive in. And the first question I have is really, you talk about choice feminism. Mm-hmm. So if you could talk about that a little bit.
Right. Well, choice feminism is the idea that whatever a woman chooses is her own business, and is a choice in and of itself is a inherently feminist act. I was reading sort of Lena Dunham writing about this, about how, you know, the most feminist thing you can do is not to judge a woman for the choices that she makes. And I guess if the choices that we're talking about are, you know, if you want a pet cat or a pet dog, sure, that seems like we should just let women decide what the most feminist pet is and not try to interfere with that decision-making process. But if the choice is, I am going to work within corporate culture, I am going to you know, move as a digital nomad to Bali and exploit the low-paid workforce there, or I'm going to, you know, any sort of arrangement of choices in the hellscape that we live in, of exploitation and oppression, and where every sort of choice that we make has a real life effect on the world that we refuse to take into consideration, then yeah, I think that we're allowed to point out that that actions have consequences, and the way that you behave in the world makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. And so what are you, I know what you are proposing here. Well, here's what you say. You say that feminism, the idea of feminism should be uncomfortable. And you are getting a little bit dark. Did just something happen to your lighting there?
No, it's just, I think
Is it? Yeah. Oh, there it is. A little movement got us.
It's just my webcam.
No problem. So this is like, it's like what you're talking about then is like an avoidance of really feeling uncomfortable, having to make any real changes. And so it's like a woman can just say, I'm a feminist because I get to choose, rather than saying, I'm a feminist, and to be a feminist, I acknowledge that there are certain values that that I would want to align with, that perpetuates sort of the greater good, or the balancing of the equation for all.
Mm-hmm.
And that might make me uncomfortable. That might not be like the most cushy situation for me, but that's what I choose, rather than I call myself a feminist and then all the choices that come after it are okay because I said so.
Right. So there's, when I was doing the book tour and I was getting questions from audience members, it was disturbing to me how specific the questions were, in the sense of like, can I get a pedicure?
Mm.
Can I take a job in finance? Can I do this or that? And it's because there's no philosophical framework within feminism as it currently exists in order to help a person understand the choices that they're making and the consequences and how to interpret their value system, or what their value system even is. And part of that is American culture believes very strongly that there should not be any hindrance on personal behavior. Anybody should be able to do anything that they want at any time. And the law, a societal contract, religion, the state should not hinder personal behavior. So if you want to drink 5 gallons of soda a day, you should be, or, feed 5 gallons of soda to your children a day, that should be allowed. If you want to homeschool your children and indoctrinate them into patriarchal monotheism, then that's okay. If you want to own 80 guns, that's okay. If you want to go to a nail salon that is run and worked by women who are kept in slave-like conditions, that's okay, because that's what the market provides to you. And so you shouldn't have anything that inhibits your behavior. And so people don't know how to think about these things because it goes against the sort of Western ideals of freedom, which has completely eroded the social contract and completely eroded any sort of religious or philosophical background that we grow up in. We don't like to think of consequences for our behavior. We just want to do whatever it is that we want to do.
So are you suggesting that there should be more social constructs in place to kind of, huddle the masses? Or are you suggesting like digging deeper for a more acutely sort of tuned moral compass?
Right. I mean, that's the thing that I can't figure out, because how do we instill that in people in a deeper way? I think that coming to feminism should be something like a religious conversion. Mm. Something that is kind of sweeping, right? So when people convert to a religion, if you're sort of like reading it in the traditional sort of William James sense of it, it's like a full understanding that changes the entire way that you look at the world. So now you have these kind of moral guideposts to go by. You have a sense of purpose and meaning, and you have a sense of belonging and community, right? So these are the things that religious conversion gives you. So if you can think about it in a feminist way, it should provide the same things. It should provide the same guideposts and community and sense of meaning. But it doesn't, because we've drained all meaning about it. And so now feminism just means I have an opinion about the Wonder Woman movie, and here's my 800 words about it.
Yeah. There's, one of the things that I loved about reading this book is that it was sparking my own imagination and my own creativity. I felt like that's what it ultimately was like an invitation to a third way, like to another way, because I feel like you laid out a lot of, it's either this or this. And you even said, even right now, like you were like, well, I haven't figured it out. This is what I'm thinking, right? Maybe it could be like a religious construct, so that we take it on, right? We don't go in well, some people, not usually with converting, but a lot of people are sort of like, you know, I'm a Christian on Sundays and the rest of the time is like whatever, right? I'm sleeping with other women and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. But there's this place where I feel like we are all trying to figure it out together, and there is a opportunity to really expand our imagination and our creativity from what has been, what, you know, what we've been shown is possible. And so much of that is like from our own wounding. And I'm going to go into this. There is a place, it's actually early on, it's on page, yeah, actually, I'm going to go to page 111 because of what we're talking about. And what I mentioned is that, you know, I was really trying to figure out what is the place where I've been complicit in this Me Too movement. And as far as, you know, as far as I had gotten was this place of that I bought into my own powerlessness when I said, you're right, my biggest power is that you desire me. If you desire me, then I have power. In that moment, I bought into my own powerlessness. And there were many years in my 20s, even when I identified as a feminist, that I absolutely manipulated men with my looks. That was just, it was like a given. It was part of the culture. I mean, I grew up in Iran, and that is definitely like, you know, the shadow. I mean, that is what women know to be their power. And so that's what I was walking around with. And so I've had to really own that. And I feel like for us to really make it out of this Me Too movement and into really creating a society and a civilization that works for us and works for our planet is going to require really like radical ownership, radical self-responsibility. And so I love this piece on page 111, where you say, your first encounter with feminism should make you uncomfortable. It has to break through all of the messages you've been indoctrinated with. You'll have to experience regret for your behavior, and you will have to acknowledge all the ways you have been consciously and unconsciously misogynistic during your lifetime. And then you go on to talk about one way to avoid discomfort. And that seems to be, one way to avoid discomfort is to ask women to reassure you that you are one of the good ones. So is there anything you want to say about that? Like that?
Well, I was specifically addressing men, but certainly women have participated in systems of oppression for a very long time. You know, the reason why the patriarchy has even existed is because it worked for a lot of women. It works for a lot of women, and why the patriarchy will continue into the future is because women are taking advantage of the sort of, you know, hashtag Me Too movement, which I have a lot of problems with, but we'll set them aside for now.
I'd love to hear that though, but let's come back to that.
But women are essentially, you know, within the literary community where I work and operate, men have been losing their jobs, and basically women are clamoring to fill those jobs. That's how they're responding to the fall of men, is to just replace them. And I don't think women are inherently more compassionate or nurturing or empathetic than men. I think women are fucking assholes on the same level that men are. They just express it very differently. And so if there's not a sort of understanding, if there's not a sort of coming to deal with your unconscious behavior and your power, hunger, and so on and so forth, and the way that you've been complicit in these systems, then nothing changes. Just because you're now in a power structure where the person on the top doesn't take their dick out all of the time, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily a better working situation. That doesn't mean that oppression in power is not happening in different ways. So I'm very concerned about this movement. I don't think that anything is actually going to improve because we're dealing mostly with corporate culture, and corporate culture is based inherently on oppression. It's inherently about the destruction of the earth. It's inherently about the destruction of the poor and income inequality. And you can't fix that just by putting a woman in power. Women have been in power over countries and corporations for decades, and the world is still shit.
Yeah. Yeah, this is why this is kind of why the cover really grabbed me. It was that piece around, dismantling the system and replacing it with one that works. It's just to keep rising, to keep climbing to the top of the system that's already there is not going to do us any good. It's so embedded and it's so, widespread. And, when I read this, I was on my way to work with a friend of mine to sort of help me write a talk. And so I was all mulling. I'd been like 10 days writing down my own ideas, and then I read your book, and then I was like, ah. And so I was looking for, because it did spark my creativity and my imagination, and I just kept looking at like, okay, so what's the other way? What's the other way? What's the other option? What do we need? And for me, at least what I kept coming back to in terms of dismantling the system, I mean, it's really, that's the key, is creating new systems that work, and it has to be sourced from someplace other than where the patriarchy has been sourced, which is the mind, which separates and says, this is mine and that is yours, and I will rise to the top at any cost. So to really create a system that's, for me, that comes from like the wisdom of our bodies, which is connected to nature. So if we could get wisdom from our bodies and our inherent connection with nature, then maybe we could have a chance at creating something that works for everybody.
Well, we need both, right? And I think that's part of the patriarchy, is this belief that it's separate. Because that's very sort of, that's very traditional in the sense of that the feminine is bound in nature and is more sort of in tune with the cycles of nature and so on, which is a lie that men came up with so that we would take care of babies. So to sort of fall into the same trap, like it's, the patriarchy sort of sets you up in the sense of it tells you stories about yourself, and a lot of those stories are very flattering, and so, or very useful. So, for example, the whole women are more nurturing, or they're more connected to nature. And you see a lot of that sort of infecting feminist writing of just like, Audre Lorde, as beautiful and amazing of a writer as she is, said some inherently naive, simplistic things about, we just need to get back in touch with nature. We just need to go for a walk in the forest, and we will, learn empathy. I was like, if that's all that it took was to take a fucking walk in the forest, like we would have a better world. Like it would be fixed, It doesn't take that. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, so I wasn't I wasn't saying that like it's just women and our connection with nature. I think I kind of like made it a tiny bit, but it's, for me, this is actually where I've arrived at, is a nugget of where I've arrived at that will probably change a year from now or whatever. But is this piece around, it's that I believe it's our disconnection with nature, men and women, that sources a deep and profound self-hatred. And then it is that self-hatred that I believe is actually rooted like in the shame around our sexuality, which then creates the misogyny and the oppression. And this all sort of comes together from, watching what oppression of female sensuality and then also sexuality of all people in Iran, like watching what that did to a civilization, which was that like good men became war-loving men filled with hate, and women became crazy. As this piece, so like to me, sexuality is like nature. That's like, that impulse for life is the place. And so when I say it's like, I feel like if we could heal our self-hatred around the fact that we are sexual beings, and if we could take that out of the dark, we can begin to find our way a little bit to be more in relationship with the fact that we live on a planet and that we live with other people. So if that sounds completely crazy to you, I'm also open to hearing that.
No, it doesn't sound crazy. I just don't know how accurate it is. As far as like, yeah, patriarchy controls sexuality and has a sort of inherent fear, but that's also just monotheism. You don't see that so much in there are cultures that don't have the sort of shame of sexuality, but also have oppression of women, and so I don't know that that's enough. I don't
No,
think
it's,
that
I don't
it's.
think it's the whole answer, but it's like it's part of the answer, because I feel like that's just, you know, even like what we're seeing, you know, the again, like the Me Too movement started with the whole Harvey Weinstein thing. And I don't know if you know about, actually, will you wave your hand in front of the camera so we get more of your light? Yes.
I don't know why it does that.
It goes. That's so weird.
Yeah, I have no idea. Here, I'll draw the lamp a little closer. We'll see if that works.
Thank you. I don't know if you know this, but Southern California Edison is trying to bury over like 3 million pounds of nuclear waste 100 feet off the coast of San Diego. Yeah, and that's like, this is like what's happening right now. They're trying to carry this nuclear waste in these thin canisters, like the depth of the thickness of a dime. And these canisters have been sitting out in weather and, you know, just in the elements, where really, like in Europe and Germany, when they're burying these canisters, they have to be 16 inches in thickness, 16 inches, and these are like 5/8 of an inch. And if they bury it within a certain period of time, they're going to get over $4 billion of taxpayers' money as a. So to me, this is a feminist issue. It's you know, and yet there are so many. I see the people that are speaking up, and then I know there are so many people that are just like, oh well, what are you going to do? It'll never happen. They say it'll never happen. And to me, that's like one of the things that I loved most about this book, because it was like saying, no, you have, like, you know, wake up, because things do happen. And I experienced that growing up, right? Because I remember growing up in Iran and wondering, like, how did we get here? Why didn't they like stop the situation before it got here? So I'd love to hear what you have to say on sort of the, you know, the environmental crisis that we're in, even just this particular issue, and, you know, the responsibility we have. How much do we speak up? Is a Facebook post enough? Is calling a representative enough? If we've taken feminism on as a religion, then what am I doing about it?
Well, that's the thing, is it's not just everything is connected, as far as you know, I remember reading when this sort of sexual harassment accusations started in Silicon Valley, and feminists started talking about, well, we should boycott Uber. And my only thought was, you should have been boycotting Uber for fucking years. Why does it take an issue to become directly about sexual assault or sexual harassment for feminists to pay attention to it, right? So any sort of issue as far as where nuclear waste is buried, or where sort of mountaintop removal happens in the coal industry, or which countries and which cities are about to be buried under the sea, et cetera, et cetera. These are all feminist issues, because this is patriarchal culture, and this is the inevitable result of patriarchal culture, is the annihilation of the planet. To strip everything of resources, everything of usefulness, to hoard it, and to let everybody else die. So all of these things are part of the same system and need to be understood. I don't think that anybody can live a clean life, obviously, because I don't think that even if you sort of tell yourself, well, I can't, live a life without electronics, which are made in China, and et cetera, et cetera. And I can't afford clothing that isn't sewn by Bangladeshi children, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just going to go fucking live in the woods, which people do. People check out in that way of like, I'm going to go be off the grid and live a sustainable life. I don't think that that helps anything. Yeah. You have to remain a participant in society in order to have an impact on society. So when we're talking about, well, what do you do? It's like, no, of course a Facebook post isn't enough. Of course calling a representative is not enough. You have to live a moral life, and you have to make sure that other people have the ability, whether that's via awareness or whether that's via sort of assets, to live moral lives as well. You can't just sort of decide, you know what, I'm just here for breast cancer and fuck everything else. Like, that's my cause. I'm going to do like 3 posts a week on it. And, you know, and I'm going to donate some money, and then I'm going to go to my job at Citibank and fuck the poor on a regular basis, like, you know, and get paid for it. That's not a moral existence.
Right. Well, this is the thing, like, and I know we're, you know, our audience at least is women today, and we are talking a lot about women. So women especially have such busy lives. Like, we're so busy, and there's, you know, I mean, women I feel like are way busier than men, especially the working moms. And so it's like what you're suggesting, like, if sort of like, if she's taken it on, if I've taken it on as a religion, feminism, and I'm so busy and I have kids and I have work and I have all of this, then it feels like the activism itself is like a full-time job. So here's the thing, like, one of the things when I was looking, okay, like, what helps? It was like, okay, community, coming together with other women, like things that can support this not feeling like such a huge, unsurmountable thing. Because I know when I'm on my own and I felt into, how do I be more productive? How do I contribute more? How do I align myself more with my values? A lot of times it's just felt overwhelming. Like, wow, I can't, like, I'm barely got energy to do all this other stuff that I'm like responsible for, which then brings us to what is our responsibility?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you have a responsibility to lead a moral existence, and to lead a life that is in alignment with your values. And look, people think that they value things that they don't actually value, and it's pretty easy to tell. You know, you can have somebody who says that they value the environment, and they live in the fucking suburbs, and they drive to work every day, and they shop at Costco. That's not somebody who actually values the environment outside of, you know, saying it out loud sometimes. You can have somebody who says that they are a feminist, and this is my most unpopular opinion, and I don't give a shit. You can't be married and a feminist. Marriage is a patriarchal control system, and that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. And so as far as how this makes you uncomfortable is, it takes a radical life change to lead a moral existence, particularly in American culture, which is so much based on capitalist consumption. And so much on pollution, and so much on resource wasting. And I'm, you know, my ideological enemy in this world, as I've come to learn, especially with talking about this book, is an upper middle class property owning married woman. Because I think that is a pretty immoral existence that is almost indefensible in the world in which we live. And they do not like to be questioned about their choices that they've made that have led them to this existence.
And how is that? Because if that woman like adopted like 5 children and she's like doing like a ton of good in the world, you're still going to say that she's like not, like, what's?
Basically, if you are upper middle class, you're doing something immoral for your job, or you're married to somebody who's doing something immoral to your job.
Really?
I truly believe that. Yeah. If you have money, it's suspect in this particular culture, because radicalism is not rewarded in our culture. It's just not. So the radicals have never been the upper middle class.
So you're saying to not be a, okay, so you're saying to not be a radical is immoral, because I know a lot of people who are doing a lot of good. Like, they are making a difference. Now, they are not radicals. That, like, in some respects they are, but you know, around feminism they're probably not. I mean, I love what you talk about here, like around our you know, the pursuit of romantic love, and how it's like this, you know, ideation that like our entire worlds are governed by. And but I'm trying to reconcile this. First, you're saying that if you have money, you're doing something immoral. And I know people who have a lot of money that are making a lot of, like, a huge difference, and, you know, truly improving the world and giving back a lot.
So define to me changing the world.
For example, I have friends that are authors and coaches that, you know, they are healing. They are healers, you know, and I know that they're healers. That's the archetype. They're presented more like as a coach, but I see and feel the work that they do behind closed doors and the contributions they make to charity. Now, I don't think that their lives are, like, you know, fully aligned as having taken feminism on as a religion, and every single thing is informed by that. But I also don't think that they're immoral.
Okay.
Well, what do you think? I want to hear.
I mean, I don't know them, but I would think that I think having a business that charges hundreds of dollars an hour, which people like life coaches and so on do tend to do. You're working with a specific clientele, you're working with a specific demographic. I don't know. I can't imagine.
What you're saying. I hear what you're saying. And it's like, I also know, like, you know, I'm kind of in this inquiry myself, because I work with people, and my fees are, you know, they're for resource women. Like, my one-on-one time is for resource women. And also I'm in the process of creating things that can be accessed for, you know, like $50 a month, and it's still the same teaching content. But it's true, like, for me to live and take care of myself, my personal time is not available, like my one-on-one time, for you know, something less than a specific rate. Yet at the same time, my commitment is to make myself available to as many people as possible, and put out a lot of free content and a lot of free teaching. So, and I'm married. According to you, I'm not a feminist. But, you know, I was much younger when I was, like, really clear that I had to get married, you know, in my relationship with my husband. And I love, there's something that you wrote here that I want to actually bring up. There's so many of these pink things. It's like, where is the one? Oh, here it is. Yeah, so you're talking about, here it is. You're talking about the vast majority of women look to their love lives ultimately to organize their lives, to induct them into motherhood, to tell them where and how to live. If you try to stake out a life outside of that, you will spend much of your time alone. So I'm curious, what do you actually say to a woman who maybe has done this, and now she finds herself in that situation, and now she's, like, waking up to the fact that this is what her creation is, and she's wanting to create a different experience, and she already has the family, and she already has the husband. So short of burning the whole house down and walking away from the family, what would you suggest?
Divorce the husband, live somewhere else. I mean,
take the kids away from the father?
No, the kids can see the father. I just don't think that. I just don't think that marriage is. I mean, if you sort of, you know, I'm not saying this arbitrarily. If you look at statistics, married men live longer, happier, healthier lives than single men. Married women live shorter, less happy, less healthy lives than single women and widows. And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is married men live off the backs of their spouses. Men live longer because they are taking those years away from their wives. I don't know how anyone can voluntarily go into that dynamic knowing that information of like, yeah, it's where, you know, I'm just going to die 2 years earlier because I'm lonely and I'm scared and I don't know what else to do with my life. And I can't fucking imagine how a man looks at that and says, yeah, I'm fine with my wife dying earlier because of me. This is still something I want to do. I honestly, I find it unimaginable. And yet people do it all of the time, and people get really angry if you question their choices when it comes to these things, because marriage gives our life and our culture the same meaning that religion used to. It has the sort of same arc of redemption. It has the same sort of the sort of heavenly afterlife aspect of the post-marriage. It has a kind of the sense of community and belonging that used to come from religious communities. And it's wrong. It's wrong to think of your lover as your savior. It's absolutely sick. Because actually the other way, it's the other way. He's killing you. Slowly but surely, and sometimes very quickly, because women are more likely to be murdered by their husbands or their fathers than any other person on any other group of people on the face of the planet. So knowing that, I have no idea how people enter into these contracts. So leave your husbands. I don't know how else to put it. It's like you should probably leave your husbands.
That's so funny, because I'm not leaving my husband, but it's funny because I called this out, like I called something similar out because, you know, we're all kind of like standing wherever we're standing. So I came up on, you know, just like the religious oppression. And so I have so many feminist friends who took their husbands' last names. I did not take my husband's last name. That was never even up for debate. So it was like, I just was like, how could you have been a feminist? Like, you know, people I've been friends with for like 20 years. Oh, and it's under the guise of, well, I have the same last name as my children, which I'm like, I understand like the desire to kind of want to have the same last name. You could come up with a new name for the whole family. There's always that. But there's also like, I feel like the numbers you're talking about, there are those who are relatively more awake and more conscious and doing work, you know, like, I mean, at least I know how supported I feel in my mission by my husband and his like constant support to like serve women, to keep expanding, to keep, you know, like basically how much he has held for me to rise. And I know other conscious couples that come together and it's like in their togetherness that they are actually making a greater difference. And so, I mean, do you see that? Do you see that in your circle? Do you see awake men and women coming together and becoming more in their service to the world?
None of my friends are married. I mean, very few of my friends are married. So no, not really. And even in the friends that are married, I can't, you know, they're the ones who tell me don't ever get married. So no, not really. Yeah. Statistically, if you're going to get raped or murdered, it's going to be your husband who does it. Yeah. You know.
That is, I mean, that's a whole, I feel like that's a whole thing too around like the collective's relationship. I mean, to the female body, like, you know, this thing that like the female body is to possess and to commoditize, like that is to be had by, you know, by the patriarchy, by man, by all of that, like that. I feel like to me, there's places where it's like, and probably because it serves my life and what I've created and I've built, but there's like the pieces that are feminism, and then there's like consciousness and how are we actually going to evolve together as a species, and wanting to blend them to create something that does provide harmony, and and this is the other piece. I really love this because, you know, my husband he's coming up on a rebirth of himself, and he's sort of a lot of like the political stuff is getting activated in him. And the conversation that we keep having is like, well, how much we're going to have to give up a lot of comfort. Like if we really want to live like this sort of thing that we're talking about, it's not going to be like, oh, everything is like so neat and pretty. it's going to be something else. And so kind of dancing with, can we do that? Can we have a child and do that? Like, what's it going to look like? You know, whose house will we be living in, and who will be where? And I feel like it's even for us, like, it's so much questioning, and it's not easy to just arrive at that. So I'm acknowledging that for everyone. This radicalism that you're proposing here is like, it takes a lot.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's this thing actually I wanted to talk about, because I want to clarify, and this is funny because I did mention this to you, and the people that follow me know that I spent several years dancing as a pole dancer at a place from across from the Pentagon. It was quite a revelation in the dynamics of power. But there's a piece here on page 11, and this I underline this because it's a debate I used to have endlessly with one of my girlfriends who is a pretty staunch feminist. And so you say women are still taking pole dancing lessons and saying it is exercise, or classes, and saying it's exercise. Women are still painfully removing all the hair from their bodies and pretending to be morons so as not to threaten the male suitors. Tell me the piece around, might be my own ignorance. I know what my relationship to it is. Why do you say women are still taking pole dancing classes and saying it is good exercise?
Because they're still pole dancing lesson studios all over the United States of America.
Right, but the way that you say it is like you're saying it. Here's the thing, like as someone who values that form of movement, and for me, what I value about it is that releases a lot of tension from my hips, and it awakens my body, and I just feel much more alive and connected to myself and my intuition, and you know, we all know where it came from for me, but you know, now I have a pole in my house. So you're saying taking the classes and saying it's good exercise is somehow not feminist.
No, I'm saying that let's be honest and say that 98% of women who are taking pole dancing classes aren't taking it because of their hips. They're taking it because they want to perform sexually for gross and disgusting men who expect that kind of behavior from their women. That's it.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with empowerment. It's mostly disempowerment because it's performing for, pickup artists and men who work in finance.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's like, there has to be both, I feel like, because for me, again, this is, will you do a little wave? So I can get your light back. Okay, and I'm going to open it up for questions here in a minute. It's like this piece, at least this is what I'm clear about, is that like there has to be a learning for women and there has to be a learning for men. And what if it was that, the women aren't taking the pole dancing classes to perform and please and, have power or desire, from some man in that exchange. But what if actually we could all learn? What if like women could actually, this is, again, comes from that creativity. Like, what's the next option? What's the third option? If there's only this and there's only this, can we create something that is different? And to me, it's like the third option is one like where the woman dancing can trust that, like for me, it's like the light of the divine feminine coming through. I'm actually embodying something that can bless the man. And then the man, in witnessing, can witness himself and where he goes to the patriarchal design to want to grab and possess and take and dominate, to witness that and to step out of that and be able to come back into his heart and actually receive what he's seeing as sort of not for him, but already blessing him in its existence without him dominating it.
Sure, that's a possibility, but most of it's still going to be like the movie Showgirls. Most of it is sexuality as a commodity. I have no judgment. I know that there are a lot of feminists who are extremely anti-sex work. They're anti-prostitution. I'm not one of them, but I also don't buy into an idea that it's changing anything. it's like the movie Showgirls, which I think is all of Paul Verhoeven's films, prophecy. It is a very accurate description of sex for money in its various forms, whether that's stripping, whether that's performing, whether that's sleeping with your boss in order to get a better job, whatever it is, that sex as a financial transaction is still the primary form of sexuality in America.
Yeah, I understand. And I mean, I totally agree with that. I think that the piece around the, excuse me, the commoditization of it, like that's what is oppressive, at least to me. Like, so what I was suggesting was sort of like, if a woman could be dancing, or if women could be dancing and men could be sitting, and there's no exchange of money, except and there's no
why is it the woman dancing? Why isn't it the man dancing? Why isn't it fuck the divine feminine unless men are embracing it? I have no interest.
Yes, why is the man not dancing? Is because the woman sexuality is the one that's been primarily commoditized. So if she's the one dancing, it's like, can her dance just be received for its own sake without needing to A, commoditize it, or B, then like now she has to give herself to the man because now he desires her. Like, I mean, when you say, and I'm not saying only, I think it goes both ways. I think we all need to learn to see that in each other. I feel like I could talk about this all day, and obviously you can too. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything else. That there's a lot that I have underlined, you guys, that I haven't even gotten to in the heat and aliveness of this moment. But I just want to look here to see what in my notes. I do want to talk a little bit, we'll just touch on this and then go into see what our questions are. You talk about problem versus responsibility. And here is what it says, what you say. The difference between something not being our problem and something not being our responsibility. Men are not our problem, but they are our responsibility. Can you speak to that?
Sure. The sort of problem aspect of it is the way that men sort of behave on social media and other forms, which is to make themselves the problem of women, to perform in a way that looks for female approval, to say, oh, well, you're one of the good ones, so you don't have to worry about it or whatever, or sort of feigning ignorance so that women have to spend their time explaining really basic bullshit to them. It's like, well, I don't understand feminism. Can you just explain it to me? Even though, it's been explained a million times over the past 100 years. So that's men as problem. And men in that form are not our fucking problem.
Right.
We don't have to talk to them when they're in that mode. We don't have to even pretend like they exist. For all we care, they don't exist. But they are our responsibility in the sense that we have to allow them to go through the questioning and the stumbling around in the dark that coming into a sort of feminist consciousness requires, and not degrade them in the process. And so the whole thing with male tears, the whole thing with making fun of men who show sort of sensitivity and regret, the whole sort of assuming that any kind of apology or coming to terms with things is disingenuous, that is irresponsible behavior.
Okay, thank you. And I know I said that was the last thing, but there's just one more thing I need to touch on, and that's this piece around beauty, because I teach a lot around beauty, and what I teach around beauty is 100% like unplugging from any sort of externalized idea that there's any ideal of beauty, and just coming into alignment with what we are, how we're created, and the full ownership of that then allows us to relax and shine our light. But I love what you say here. It's you're saying that beauty is basically linked to lovability and acceptability, that in our culture is not only linked to physical features, but the notions of acceptability are involved, which is why we're constantly reminded by the media that women who make themselves too much, either too ambitious or too independent or too educated, will find themselves unlovable. And you know, the other reason I love this is because what I say to my clients is like, whatever you think you're too much of, be that, be more of that, like be that all the way. And this piece around beauty and acceptability and fuckability, you're saying should be divorced from our sense of value. And I feel like this to me, can you say a little bit more about this actually?
Well, which part?
Just how are you suggesting that, you know, a woman who doesn't want to live her whole life alone, divorce her beauty, you know, I mean, and maybe she wants to be with her spiritual partner, right? Maybe like, whether it's a woman or a man, right? She could be hetero or not. How in this culture are you saying that divorce your sense of value from the acceptability and the lovability that comes from, you know, presenting a certain way?
Right, because feminine beauty is not just about what your lips look like or your weight or whatever. It's how you present yourself in public, whether or not you are demure, and whether you behave yourself. But also how you sort of, what you want, what your ambitions are. There are constant articles in the news media about how if you buy a house, you're less likely to get married later on. If you have advanced degrees, you are less likely to be married. If you are a CEO, you are less likely to ever find a husband. It's constant. And what it's telling women is if you want to be married, you should make yourself as small as possible. And men like small women. Men like women who they can dominate, because that's what the culture tells them to want. And a lot of men don't question that thing. So you see men sort of drawn mysteriously to women who are idiots. Women who are not as smart as them, not as ambitious, because then they can sort of control their lives, make them quit their jobs in order to raise children, et cetera, et cetera. It's pernicious.
This is amazing because I want to acknowledge that I know a lot of conscious men, but I also spent time with a couple this last weekend who he was married and she was his mistress, and he was ultimately not going to leave his wife because he lives with his mistress and he goes to see his wife once a week and he has intimacy with the wife. And the reason he's never going to leave the wife is because the wife never asks any questions.
Sure.
And mistress, I mean, she's like a raging, you know, wild woman, and she has so many emotions and she has so many demands. And so I'm hearing what you're saying, and I feel you because I had an experience of it this last weekend. And at the same time, I really want to acknowledge that in my community, there are so many conscious men who do really support the rise of their women or the women in their community and in their tribe. So I just want to see. Let's see if we have any questions. So if you are watching with us on Zoom and you have questions for Jessa, then you can type those in the chat. I'm also gonna try and open up the Facebook here to see those of you who are with us live. Oh my goodness, okay. There is a lot of comments here. So let me see what I can sort through here. Okay. So be patient with me, you guys. I'm trying to, I should have had my assistant be on with me. Okay, let's see if I open this a little bit more. We have to first envision a better future for it to come about. What is your vision? So Carrie's asking, what is your vision for a better future, Jessa?
Well, it depends on the aspect. You know, I really want secular convents. this is what I want, this is what I'm fighting for. I'm probably just going to start my own women-only spaces and communities and economies, sort of closed cities within cities. That's a vision of the future that I can support.
How do we the human race? I mean, are we just going to give up having more humans if we're just going to have communities with just women?
Shouldn't we?
We're overpopulated.
Wildly overpopulated. So having children is probably wildly immoral, and I actually do believe that it is. But again, it's not a very popular opinion. But it is. So yeah, I'm fine with a sort of a removal of reproduction from a sort of projected female existence.
Yeah, I hear you. Carrie, I don't know if you're still here. I would love to hear your thoughts on Jessa's answer to that, secular convents and communities with women. So just watching out for you, you'll be starting that. Jessa's not on Facebook, so you will have to Google her to see if she's starting her community. Let's see what is. This is interesting because it's so interesting that Chriselle, there's a woman on here who was my hiking guide in Hawaii when I went to Maui a few years ago, and she's sort of been following, we've connected online. And it's interesting that she thinks that the conversation that we are having goes against everything that I stand for, which is interesting because I don't think that it does. Or, I think it's that I'm open to being challenged. I'm open to having a conversation. Being told that I'm not a feminist because I'm married, and then there's a lot that I do agree with. So I'm curious to know what she thought was so against everything that is my life. But I just want to find the questions. Wait, so that must be connected to a previous question because I don't understand that. Carol is saying not all men are like that. That's not what she's saying, though. This will work about 5% of the human race, even less than the current system. Okay, I don't. Let me just see 1 second. Andrea says we are not getting divorced. What? This is the point, right? Like I told you guys that, this review said that Crispin has taken a wrecking ball to the whole structure. So I didn't say that this was going to be easy. It's certainly not easy for me to sit here and have her tell us that if we want to be considered a feminist, to divorce your husbands. When I sat here and told you guys, change your name back, right? So change your name back to your maiden name. Who says? And it's just really, I think the conversation, the intention for this for me is for us to awaken to how comfortable, in the name of being comfortable, how unconscious we let ourselves go and how many things we just fall in line with. That's the intention, like for me and for you guys, is to just wake up and question and keep waking up and keep taking more responsibility. Alice says, I'm a fucking radical through and through, and I have cash. and Alice is an amazing woman who, she has a community of women. She was in an abusive relationship. She was a single mom. She has raised herself up from the ground, and she talks about it. So it's interesting to see all of the diversity here. Okay, yeah. So Carrie says again, I'm a little lost. What are the values underpinning the feminism you are envisioning?
Total equality. That no human life has any more value than any other human life. So my human life has no more value and deserves no more comfort and no more love and no more security than a woman living in Nepal or a man living in Indonesia or whatever, especially people who are sort of roped into providing our services for us and our clothing and our labor and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I believe, that there's no true justice, there's no true gender justice unless there's absolutely economic leveling worldwide.
equality worldwide. And you feel that this is somehow like having like secular comments like that, you feel like that is going to support that?
I mean, the sort of shared domestic labor so that it's not outsourced to other people is an important point. There is a very good essay, and now I'm totally blanking on the woman's name, but it's How to Build a Non-Sexist City. And it's about how the nuclear family is now the building block of urban design, and how inefficient that is, and how essentially it was designed as a way of oppressing women and to keep them in domestic spaces. And how cities and places with shared domestic labor have a sort of more egalitarian approach to domestic division of labor. Because if you have to provide your own domestic services, if you have to raise your own children, do your own dishes, cook your own meals for everybody in the family, most of that work is still delegated to women. And the way that women have chosen to deal with that is to pay immigrants to do that work and to pretend like that's liberation and freedom and to pretend like that's empowerment. It's not empowerment to give your laundry to immigrants to wash for you and to pay them next to nothing for their services. It's not empowering to pay somebody to drive your food over in a blizzard on their bicycle because you're too, because you can't be fucking bothered to go to the corner store, and then you tip them $2. That's not empowerment. That is just oppression and exploitation.
Yeah, well, and this just comes back to like some of the main global issues facing girls and women, which is like education and opportunity. And, because if you have an immigrant who is uneducated, who doesn't, it's like they can, whatever their contribution is. When you take a very privileged white woman who is very educated and sort of her zone of genius, and for her to even feel productive, she would have to be doing things other than just sort of like laundry and housework all day. That goes back to like the basic fundamental right of like education. And I mean, that it comes back to that, an opportunity, education and opportunity. That's what it's.
But shared domestic labor is the only sort of fair way out of this exploitation of where houses pool resources together so that laundry is done together and cooking is done together and et cetera, so that you're not torn between I'm going to make my wife/slave do it, or I am going to pay, a Mexican to come and mow my lawn because I don't want to do it. So.
Yeah, I hear you. I really appreciate this. And let's see. So we have, there's more people coming on now. I just want to check back with the chat. Oh, there's more questions here. So hang on, you guys. I am navigating between the screens. Isn't judgment of others a radically patriarchal way of being? Who is moral, who is not? Patriarchy isn't male or female. It is still the same person. I'm going to read it. It's not male or female. It's a state of being, one that is not based on separate. Well, to me, patriarchy is based on separation, but she's saying it isn't based on separation. Feminism is the annihilation of the human species. Really, equality is separating from general population. I guess that's the question, is that equality, to create that equality that you would then be separating from the general population?
In some ways, yeah, but you can't, like I said, you can't sort of just go out and live in the woods. And I do feel like people don't understand what patriarchy is or means, because
let's define it. How do you define patriarchy?
To me, it's any society, or not to me, in a general way, it's understood to be a society that is based around hierarchy. So certain people have more power based on how much wealth they have, what demographic they belong to, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just about men, although that's traditionally who held power through property and wealth. But if we now just have women with property and wealth in positions of power, it's still patriarchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And to me, I have sort of the definition for patriarchy that came through experience, and that's sort of patriarchy. I feel like is the system of thought, constructs, beliefs that were sourced in the mind and that are based on fear. And so they're based on fear of separation. They're based on separation and fear of lack and scarcity. So I feel like patriarchy is like sourced in the ego's fear of death, and it's produced this sort of like, this is mine, that is yours. And I feel like it's designed to squelch, the voice of the deep feminine. And to me, the voice of the feminine lives within men and women. So I don't believe that patriarchy, this is, at least for those of us watching, that patriarchy is only oppressive to women. I believe there are men who are oppressed by patriarchy as well. White men less, but the system is oppressive all in all. And so important to be asking these questions. So I just want to see if there's any more questions on Facebook, you guys. We have been here for over an hour. I really appreciate about 20 of you over the course of the 2, and I know a lot of you are going to catch the recording and the replay. Really appreciating you, Jessa, giving your time and being willing to have this conversation, this important conversation for us as we find our way to creating a society that does provide equality and equal opportunity, equal opportunity to happiness and thriving for all, which here we are proposing it's feminism, and we're trying to figure out what that means to all of us and how to come into alignment with that and how to live in integrity and with morality. And I think that I also want to say I love this in the end of the book, which you are, telling us that we're not doing it wrong. This to me, it comes back to this. You're not doing feminism wrong. You're not ruining things for other women. You're not betraying your sisters. The choices you make on a daily basis, your haircut, your diet, which petition you sign, the opinions you voice, which television show you either pay for or download, are not destroying the world. But just as much as you are not saving the world, you are not heroically making the world safer for women with your haircut, your diet, your petition. And excuse me. And here it says, for too long, feminism has been moving away from being about collective action and collective imagination and toward being a lifestyle. Lifestyles do not change the world. And I really just want to invite all of us to open our imaginations and our creativity, really feeling into what works for all of us globally as we go into 2018, and how uncomfortable are we willing to get in the name of what we say we value. Is there anything you want to add here, Jessa, before we sign off?
No, not really. Okay.
Well, thank you for being with us, and thanks for everyone watching, and Happy New Year. I'm sure I will be hearing from all of you. Bye-bye.